We're going to do a fairly complex example, and I'm going to do this end to end. So you're going to see every single little flaw and mistake I make. You may hear some bloopers. You may hear me lose my temper at the keyboard because it's not been cooperating today. But we're also going to introduce the concept of QProperty. If you go all the way back to the first video, I talk about how it's looking for properties, and we're going to really talk about that in depth. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this QML interface. It's going to have start, pause, resume, and stop, and it's going to interface with some machine in the background. Now, this machine could be anything, but we're going to build it from scratch in C++, and it's going to have some of this functionality. And we're going to get real-time progress and all the other goodies. Let's go ahead, dive in, take a look, right-click, add new. And I want to make a C++ class. Let's call this machine. QObject. There will be copy and pasting because there is a lot of code we're going to chew through here. So let's jump in. I'm going to try and blast through some of the boring parts here just to not waste your time. So I'm going to put some includes, QObject, QTimer, QVariant, QDebug. All of those should be self-explanatory. Now, what we want to do is we want to have some signals, some slots, and some private stuff here. So let's go ahead and jump in there. I'm going to say public slots, and let's say private slots. And let's make some private variables. QTimer, let's call this mTimer. And int mValue. So in case you've already guessed, we're going to use a timer. It's going to kick off certain intervals. So our private slot is going to be this timeout. And that's where we're going to handle the actual timer. Now, some signals, right off the bat, what we want to do is we want to have some things like progress, started, stopped, resumed. So I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to jump down to public slots first. Void, and our slot's going to be start. Thank you, keyboard, for ruining my video. There we go. Void, stop. Now we want void, pause, void, resume. You know, some basic functionality you'd expect out of a machine. We can take these, kind of copy and paste in here, and we can say, all right, I want to know started and stopped, paused, resumed, and I also want a progress here. Those are going to be our beautiful little signals. And you know what? I want some normal functions too, because gosh darn it, why not? So I'm going to say value, obviously going to return an int. And because we have that, we want to do a void set value as well. Now, you might already be looking at this going, now wait a minute, why are you adding these when we've already talked about they have to be a slot? Well, they don't actually have to be a slot. Remember, going back from our conversation, they have to be a property of some kind. So let's go up here, right next to this QObject macro. We don't really go to this little area very much, but we're going to today. We're going to make what's called a QProperty. QProperty has some special verbiage. QProperty, and notice how it wants a type, read, write, and notify. So what are we talking here? We're giving it some sort of type, a name. So we're creating a variable basically. But then we have to do a getter, a setter, and then some sort of signal. That's right. We're actually making a property that can be consumed by QML. So I'm going to go here, just double click it. It puts all this out here. I'm going to change this to int, and I want this to be workload. And for the read, I'm going to say value. So read is when QML says, hey, what is the value here? Notice how IntelliSense tries to help us out. And this gets a little frustrating when you're working with it. It tries to actually switch things around. I'm going to say value. Stop doing that. So I'm going to copy. Sometimes you got to force this to do your bidding. value, and then it automatically does set value. I'm going to uppercase that, but then suddenly it flips it around. Oh man, that gets frustrating. Sometimes this does not help us out at all. So how do we work with this? Very simple. You can do it off the screen and just copy and paste, or you can sit here and fight with the editor. Sometimes I'll actually comment it out, and then I'll say, okay, do my bidding, editor. Notice how because it's commented out, it's not automatically changing it around. So why am I not trusting the editor? It's not that I don't trust the editor, I just know what I want and how I want it. And the editor is just kind of bumping its ugly head up and saying, do it the way I want it. I'm just showing you that you can do it however you want. Comments are your friends. You can also do it off the screen and copy and paste. But if you start fighting with the editor, that's all you need to do is comment it out. All right, short version, QProperty. A property has multiple parts, but you don't necessarily need them all. At a minimum, you need a read. So you can say QProperty, the type is an int. The name is going to be workload. If QML wants to read the property, it's going to call value, which is, ta-da, right here. Notice that is not a slot. If QML wants to write the property, we're now talking about property binding in QML. We do set value, which is, ta-da, right here. This could be a Q variant, but we're really not going to specify that. Now, realistically, this should be a Q variant because it's coming back from QML, but I'm going to demonstrate it doesn't necessarily need to be. Notify, you guessed it, that's our signal right here. So we have a design pattern we have to stick to. Read, write, and notify. And this confuses people, but it's very simple. Read, write, notify. So getter, setter, setter. Let's start over. Getter, setter, and notify, which is just simply our signal being emitted. Has a lot of ugly definitions and all this little helpful stuff, and the editor tries to pop up and help you, but really that's what it boils down to, is a property is a read, write, and a notify. As long as you have those in, you're good. Let's go ahead and start fleshing all these out, and I'm going to go here. Just going to actually right-click and add all these in super quick. Now, I should note this is not necessarily going to be a perfect bulletproof kind of application. I'm just showing you how to work with primarily a C++ type in QML and the Q property. So you may actually find some bugs in here. This right here is actually one of them. If you talk to some official or an actual employee of Q, they're going to tell you that should be a Q variant. I'm just showing you, you can do it. You may get some disastrous results. All right, now that we've got that, let's jump into our code file here. And I'm just going to say mtimer set interval. And if me typing starts taking too long, I'm just going to start copying and pasting. So I'm going to say connect. We're going to connect that timer up. Mtimer is our object. Our signal is going to be the QTimer timeout. Destination object is this, and our slot is going to be the machine timeout. There we go. Very helpful that the IDE thinks we want those extra parentheses in there. All right, so the value, this is our getter. This is where we need to actually return a value. So I'm going to say QInfo returning value. Now our set value, this is where QML says, hey, put this in there. So I'm going to just grab this. Setting value, and I'm going to say mValue equals the data. Now because we've changed that underlying value, we actually need to emit our progress. That's our notify of the Q property. So if you look just at what we have here, that is our full life cycle of this property. We have a virtual variable, this doesn't actually exist, called workload that QML will work with. it's going to expect an int type. Its read is going to be the value, its write is going to be set value, and its notify is going to be progress. So once you get all of that wrapped around in your head, you now fully understand QProperty and how powerful that is. All right, let's dive back in here, and we are going to flesh the rest of this out very, very quickly. So start, I'm going to say m value equals 0, set value, m value. Probably didn't really even need to do that because we are setting it up here. So I could have actually just done set value 0. And then I'm going to go, that may come back to bite us. I'm just kind of winging it at the moment. I was looking at my notes and I was looking at that and I went, wait, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to go ahead and start that timer. And then I'm going to say emit started, just so we get some sort of feedback in QML. Stop, pretty much the opposite of that. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to say timer stop. Then I want to emit stopped. Pause. Pause is pretty much the same darn thing. Actually, we're just going to make it the same thing. And then resume. Bear with me one moment. Pause. There we go. Resume. We're going to emit resumed. All right. Got those in place. Now our timeout. Nothing super special here. We're just going to say m value. And then we're going to emit a progress. Again, this is not super bulletproof code, but we're just going to make it somewhat functional. M value is greater than 99. Then we're going to go ahead and call stop. Just kind of streamline that a little bit. Let's go ahead and give this a good build just because I'm a little bit nervous. I deviated from my notes. All right, let's go ahead and make sure we get a good run. Now we're going to wire all this stuff up in QML. All right, let's go in here, and we are going to jump right in here, and we're going to register this type. So actually, first things first, we need to actually include it. And QML register type machine is our type. Now we need to give it the big, what I call the ugly code. To avoid naming conflicts, Qt recommends you use your company's URL backwards, or URI, and then the actual name of the thing that you want, just in case you come up with a great idea and someone else comes up with a great idea and they're both named the same thing. All right, now that we got this type in here, save, give it a good build just because I'm nervous. Make sure it actually starts up. Now we just need to wire up this QML. All right, moment of truth. Fingers crossed. Let's jump in here. First things first, we need to, you guessed it, import. So we're going to import com.tell us, since it's not helping us out, company.machine. This is going to be version 1.0. Once we've got that in there, well, you guessed it, we can actually go ahead. Let's go create our machine. IntelliSense suddenly sees it. Bang, there it is. Let's give it an ID. Machine, and I'm just going to start hammering the rest of this code out very, very quickly. Component uncompleted, so when this window is completed, I want to actually update that progress bar. I've got right here, ta-da, progress bar. Say progress bar dot value equals machine, pay special attention here, workload. Does that look super familiar? Workload, that's part of our QProperty. So when we go into our actual machine, QProperty type is an int, name is workload. So that's what we're going to be interacting with. So what's happening under the hood when we go in here and we say the progress bar dot value equals machine workload, we're actually calling the read that, which is calling value da da da. Whew, boy, that gets a little confusing. Now we're going to really just completely flesh this thing out. we're going to work with our signals, and we got a few of them. So we're going to say on started, on stopped, on paused, and let's go with on resumed. And last but not least, I want on progress. If you're wondering how I'm getting these, basically take your signals from your class, these guys, and put the word on in front of them, and then automatically capitalize it. That's where it's getting it from. Qt does all that automatically. I'm not a huge fan of automatic things because then you're left with questions like, no, wait a minute, how'd you get this? Isn't it called started? That's basically all it's doing, is slapping the word on and then uppercasing the first letter. All right, so now we just need to work with our interface. I know all these things, but I'm going to recap anyways. Pretty self-explanatory. Labels called LBL status, progress bar is progress bar, and then I've got some buttons. Button start, button pause, button resume, button stop. Let's go ahead and fill these out. So on started, I'm going to say btn start dot enabled, just going to work with our interface, equals false. Why? Because we're starting this. And then we want the btn stop dot enabled equals true. Same thing with pause. We're going to say we want to be able to pause this. And then we don't want to be able to resume because we are currently running. Resume is not something you do when you're running. So, and then let's go ahead and change that status. So I'm going to say LBL status.text started. And we can just pretty much copy this so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and paste it right in here. So when we're stopped, we want this to be false. We want the stopped, actually, am I in the wrong spot? I am in the wrong spot. If we're stopped, we do want to be able to start. Sorry about that. We want to not be able to stop because we're already stopped. And pause, well, we don't want to be able to pause. Resume, we don't want to be able to resume. And let's go ahead and set our progress bar. Why are you acting that way? Progress bar. There we go. Then on paused, I'm going to just paste that in there. Pause, we don't want to be able to start. We do want to be able to stop just in case they're paused and they go, you know what, I just want to kill this thing. And pause, false, obviously, because we're currently paused. Resume, let's let that be true. Now, actually, I think I got a bug right here. I do. All right, so if we're started, we cannot start, we can stop, we can pause, but we cannot resume. Just recapping here. If we're stopped, we want to be able to start, but not stop or pause or resume. If we're paused, we want to not be able to start, can stop, cannot pause because we're already paused, but we do want to be able to resume. Ooh, that gets bloody confusing. All right, and last but not least, resumed. False, true. We do want to be able to pause, and we do not want to be able to resume. So basically just playing around with the GUI, making sure we got everything. Progress, we are almost done, I promise. And we're going to say progress plus and machine dot special attention to the variable name workload. Notice how when we go into machine, though, we have a whole slew of things we can play with. We don't want to call timeout. You may see that. You don't want to play with that because of scope, the way we've got it in there. And what I mean by that, ta-da, it's actually private. We don't want to play around with that. Let's go here. Workload, and we're going to say plus some sort of %, and then progress bar dot value equals, and I'm going to say the machine dot workload times 0.01. That way that'll be beautiful. Now we need to actually turn these buttons on. This is the last thing. So button start is going to be machine dot start. And then we can actually just copy and paste this, make it super, super simple. Naming convention, if you keep them pretty simple, this will be lining up just beautifully. All right, let's give this a double check before we do our initial maiden voyage. We've got our import, component uncompleted window. We have got our progress bar synced up, and we've actually made the machine, given it an ID of machine, and we've hooked into all of those signals. Ooh, that is a lot of typing. Our buttons, we're actually controlling the machine, start, pause, resume, and stop. Let's go ahead and give this a run, see what happens. And place your bets, place your bets. Is this thing going to work? Start, started, and there it goes. We can speed this up by adjusting the timeout on the timer. We can actually pause it. It is at, let's say, about 8%. We can go ahead and just talk for a minute and talk about how beautiful and elegant this interface is. And you know what? Done listening to Brian. Let's resume it. And it picks right up where it left off. We can pause it again, resume it again, and we can stop it. And then we can hit start and start all over again. So this is kind of a complex example of something you can do with very introductory knowledge of QML and some C++. You can actually make some pretty complex interfaces. Now in a real world example, let me go ahead and stop this and close it. This machine could be hooking into actual APIs and reading serial ports or reading USB ports or whatever, and you have some back-end machine like a giant water filtration system or something like that. But the big takeaway I want you to focus on is Q property is your friend. Everything in QML thinks it's a property. Properties can have read, write, and notify. At a minimum, you need a read, but I would suggest do read, write, and notify for just about anything you do. And it's very, very simple. A read returns a value, a write sets a value, and notify is just simply a signal.